Welcome to Epic Chrono.
Can you imagine the terror that lurks in the shadows of war, the unspeakable acts committed not on the battlefield, but behind closed doors? History is a grim witness to such atrocities, where the light of humanity often fades into oblivion. As we delve into the darkest corners of the Second World War, we explore the less discussed yet profoundly harrowing experiences of captured female soldiers at the hands of the Nazis. In the backdrop of the war's deafening roars, a silent horror unfolded. Beyond the front lines, behind the fortified walls of prison camps, these women faced a different kind of battlefield. A grim reality where the enemy was not just across the trenches, but within the very walls that enclosed them. These untold stories of courage, resilience, and unspeakable brutality form a chilling chapter in our shared past. In this darkness, the tales of captured female soldiers lie, buried and forgotten. It all started in 1939, a year that would mark the beginning of a nightmare for many. This was the year when the world was plunged into the abyss of World War II. The instigator? Nazi Germany, a name that still sends chills down the spine of history. Under the iron fist of Adolf Hitler, Germany began its ruthless expansion, swallowing up country after country in its all-consuming maw. Poland fell first, followed by Denmark, Norway, and the Low Countries. France, a nation known for its indomitable spirit, was next, falling under the jackboot in less than 2 months. In the east, the Nazis forged a blood-soaked path through the vast expanses of the Soviet Union, sowing seeds of terror and despair. This rapid expansion was not just a display of military might. It was a dark canvas on which the Nazis painted their horrifying masterpiece of inhumanity. As the Nazi war machine grew, so did the terror it inflicted, particularly on the most vulnerable. Amid the chaos and destruction, many brave women stepped up to fight. Little did they know, the real battle would start after capture. In the thick of World War II, countless women rose to the call of duty. Their roles varied widely, from nurses in the field to intelligence officers, from pilots to foot soldiers. They were the unsung heroes, the brave hearts who dared to step into a predominantly male battlefield, knowing the risks and the stakes. They hailed from various countries, backgrounds, and walks of life, united by a common goal: to stand up against the oppressive Nazi regime. Their courage was undeniable, their spirit unbroken. However, the battlefield is a cruel place, and many of these heroic women were captured by the enemy. The circumstances of their capture were as diverse as their roles. Some were taken prisoner during major battles, others while on covert missions. There were those who were captured in their own homes, their identities as resistance fighters exposed. Many were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, swept up in the relentless tide of war. Yet, regardless of how they ended up in the hands of the enemy, they all shared a common experience: a chilling transition from soldier to captive. Stripped of their uniforms, their identities, their freedom, they were thrust into a world of uncertainty and fear. The war was no longer a distant external conflict. It was up close and personal, a battle for survival against an enemy who viewed them as less than human. The Nazis, in their ruthless pursuit of power, subjected these women to unimaginable horrors. They were used, abused, and dehumanized, their spirits tested to their limits. Yet even in the face of such adversity, many found the strength to resist, to hold on to their humanity, to hope for a brighter tomorrow. Once in the hands of the enemy, these women faced a new kind of nightmare. Behind the walls of concentration camps and prisons, the Nazis committed heinous acts against these captured female soldiers. A shroud of darkness enveloped these places, where humanity was lost and brutality reigned supreme. The testimonies of survivors and historical records reveal a chilling narrative of the horrors they faced. These brave women, torn from their homes and thrust into a world of unimaginable terror, experienced treatment so inhumane, it defies comprehension. Stripped of their dignity, they were subjected to relentless physical abuse and degradation, their bodies treated as mere objects for the twisted amusement of their captors. In the deathly silence of the night, the echoes of their cries were swallowed by the cold, unfeeling walls. Each day was a battle for survival, a test of their will to live. They were forced to endure extreme conditions with minimal food and water, often succumbing to disease and malnutrition. The harrowing sights of fellow prisoners succumbing to their fate, their life force extinguished by the relentless brutality, only added to the ambient terror. Imagine the agony of living in constant fear. not knowing if the coming dawn would bring relief or further torment. The Nazis showed no mercy, no regard for the sanctity of life. They were driven by a perverse ideology that devalued these women, reducing them to less than human. Historical records, though dry and distant, paint a gruesome picture of the atrocities these women faced. But these records only tell part of the story. The full extent of their suffering, the depth of their despair, can only be truly understood through their own words, their own testimonies. They speak of pain and loss, of shattered dreams and stolen futures, but they also speak of resilience and hope, of the indomitable spirit of humanity that refused to be crushed, even in the face of the most abhorrent cruelty. But it wasn't just physical torture they had to endure, it was also psychological. The Nazis didn't just break bodies, they shattered minds too. Beneath the surface of physical brutality there lurked an even more sinister form of torture, one that left no visible scars but wreaked havoc on the psyche. The Nazis were not just masters of physical torment, but they also excelled at the art of psychological warfare. Their methods were designed to degrade, demoralize, and dehumanize their prisoners. These captured female soldiers were subjected to relentless mental abuse. Their identities stripped away, they were reduced to mere numbers, a stark reminder of their reduced status. The Nazis sought to obliterate their sense of self, to make them feel less than human. This tactic was not just cruel, it was strategic, aimed at breaking their spirit, making them more compliant, more susceptible to control. Humiliation was a common tool used in this psychological onslaught. The Nazis would often force their captives to perform degrading tasks, to rob them of their dignity and self-respect. They were made to feel worthless, their self-esteem shattered, their confidence eroded. This was not just about inflicting physical pain, but about fostering a sense of hopelessness and helplessness. The psychological torture was relentless, a constant barrage of mental torment. Sleep deprivation, sensory overload, and isolation were all used to wear down their mental resilience. The goal was to create an environment of constant fear and uncertainty where the prisoners never knew what to expect next. This unpredictability was itself a form of psychological torture, keeping them in a constant state of distress. Yet, amidst this mental abuse, these women showed remarkable strength and resilience. They clung to their humanity, their inner strength becoming a beacon of hope in the darkness of their captivity. They held on to their identity, their sense of self, not allowing the Nazis to strip them of who they were. Their bodies might have been imprisoned, but their minds were trapped in a cage of fear and despair. Despite this, they refused to let their spirits be broken, proving that while the body can be confined, the human spirit is indefatigable. When the war ended in 1945, the physical and psychological scars remained, haunting these brave women for the rest of their lives. Their bodies may have been freed from the chains of their captors, but their minds were still held captive by the memories of the unspeakable horrors they endured. The aftermath of their ordeal was a war in itself, a battle against the ghosts of the past that sought to consume them. To the world, they were survivors, but to themselves, they were prisoners, shackled by the weight of their experiences, their voices silenced by the stigma of their abuse. They were women who had witnessed the darkest side of humanity, and they carried the burden of their knowledge with them, a constant reminder of the atrocities they had suffered. In the aftermath of the war, many of these women found themselves grappling with the psychological trauma of their experiences. Nightmares, flashbacks, depression, anxiety. These were the unseen wounds that they bore, the silent screams that echoed in their minds. The war had ended, but their battle was far from over. And yet, in the face of their immense suffering, these women were largely forgotten. Their stories were brushed under the carpet, their voices drowned out by the clamor of victory celebrations. They were left to navigate the stormy seas of their trauma alone, without the recognition or support they deserved. The lack of recognition was not just a slap in the face, but a knife in the heart. It was a betrayal that added insult to their already profound injuries. These women were not just victims, they were warriors, and they deserved to be treated as such. In the end, these women were not broken by their experiences, they were shaped by them, molded into figures of resilience and strength. They survived the unimaginable, and in doing so, they became a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. They survived the war, but the war never left them.